Hi, I'm Eric, and I'm a social studies educator, historian, and host of this, the Everything is a Primary Source podcast. I'm also an avid collector of popular culture artifacts. I love what I find at thrift store outlets, garage sale leftovers, and what I spot just making my way around the built world. I enjoy sorting through boxes of free books and magazines, not to mention online collections like Internet Archive, and of course the Library of Congress. But you don't need to spend your time digging through bins or following online rabbit holes to get a look into the past. The movies and TV we watch, the books we read, and the games we play are all documents of the past. So is fashion, food, music, toys, even the roads we travel on and the places we live and work in. Everything is a primary source. This podcast is the result of exhibiting these kinds of artifacts in public, getting passersby to select an item they connect with, and then chatting with me to see what it says about the time, place, and people who made it. The conversation you are about to hear, therefore, is your history, my history, our history, through popular culture. I'm so glad to have Dave from Rochester, New York with me here in Old Greenwich, Connecticut, in case anybody is confused as New Greenwich, Connecticut. Are you having a good time at the fair?
I'm just completely overwhelmed.
I've never been to this before. Have you?
I had not either, no.
But it draws in people, I think, that have such a similar interest as you and I, of just like graphic design.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And the crazy thing about it is you go to a table and you see that's a one-of-a-kind item. And right next to it's another one.
Yeah.
And right next to it's another one. And you say, wow.
I guess that's print media for you, right? The printing press has done its job if we have lots of the same thing. But it's also, I think, even something that looks like something, if it belonged to somebody, it was personalized in some way, right? How many of these things, if you look at the back of them, are written on or have some kind of just a crease on it that makes it show that it belonged to somebody at some point and it meant something to somebody.
It's amazing, just the archives that you see here that have come out of people's houses, and if it weren't for all of these dealers, they would be sitting in a landfill somewhere.
Yeah.
And that's the amazing thing about it. They've been saved, and the history has been saved.
That's exactly my point of view on it, too. I love that idea of preservation of history. I don't think that most people are intentionally favoring landfills, but we have enough of our culture that is okay with it that it ends up with it like that. Like, I don't think there's too many people that be like, I would gladly take this, old comic book or even just like an old menu from a restaurant and just chuck it. But it just gets lost in the minutia, I guess.
Well, what happens is somebody passes, goes into assisted living, downsizes, and they see no value in that, and nobody's going to want this. Who's going to want this if you're not aware of the ephemera trade? And as far as you're concerned, it's just stuff.
Yeah.
And why would somebody want the brochures from my 1960s trip somewhere? And it just gets tossed, unfortunately. And that's all of our jobs is to preserve that and find lasting homes for somebody that appreciates it.
I'm glad that this is a meeting place of all of that. We're all in the same mindset of, because there's dealers, there's just people's business in a lot of cases, but it's also that unified force of let's work on this together and make sure that we can't save it all, but what we can, let's preserve. Well, speaking of forces,
nice segue.
Yeah,
you're a professional.
I try my best. You identified that one of your favorite forms of paper media is comic books, and that's what you trade in almost exclusively as your business, Paper
Koi.
Paper Koi. Tell me a little bit about Paper Koi and what your favorite forms of media is.
Well, as the name there with the paper, I do pretty much in anything paper except stamps, and I'm beginning to learn them as well. Seeing the value in brochures, postcards, comic books, sports cards, trading cards, old trade cards, et cetera, and trying to find good homes for them. Again, finding the value in things that nobody else does and bringing them to people that will definitely appreciate them. And one of the great things about it is, to give you an example, I had we were talking before the show here a little bit about the area that you know, and I don't know if you're aware of Dansville, New York or not, but I had a report card from Dansville, New York that I sold, and the person that bought it said, I absolutely love this. That person was my kindergarten teacher that signed the report card.
Oh my goodness.
So, something that to 99.99% of the people have no value, to this person it meant something because it was a connection to their past with their kindergarten teacher. And that's just the absolute beauty of ephemera. You love hearing those stories. You absolutely never know what's going to connect with somebody or why.
Yeah, I mean that's what I'm doing now. Is we're making oral histories based on those kinds of connections, and that's a fabulous story. And I just realized I also wasted my segue because I didn't even mention why I said force, but I will now. One of the things
it's with you.
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly. It's everywhere. It binds us. You chose both comic books, but this one is a tiny one because it would fit in the size of an Atari game cartridge box, and that's because it's called Atari Force. And the other comic that I have is a more traditional size comic. It's one we talked about earlier, the Fabulous Furry Freak Brothers. And they're separated probably about 15 years apart from each other. But what do they have in common with one another as far as comic books being the mode of communication here?
Well, the first one, or the Atari Force one, actually, that was made by DC Comics on a licensing type deal. So that was placed in with the cartridges, and that was the way that was given away. So it would be more of an advertising promotional kind of thing, which of course goes way back. They've been doing promotional comics all the way through. There were a couple of companies that actually specialized in just doing those as well for companies. So if you had a lumber company, for example, or a train, in fact, I've got one that I bought earlier today. It's actually a railroad promotional comic as well. So that's what that is. So that wasn't actually available through the newsstand. However, they also did a regular-sized version of Atari Force. That was, yes, they did.
Okay.
Yep, that was available through. So this was kind of the promotional. The Freak Brothers, of course, would be what you would call an underground comic book.
Yeah.
And that was not that was sold through head shops back in the day, is where that would have been distributed. Those have a lot of times more sexual or drug-oriented, because mainstream comics were generally under the confines of the comic code at that point. And obviously a story like that would not fly back in the day, so people still had that creativity in them, so they made things like that then sold through the head shops and that sort of place as well. So they're called underground comics, as a matter of fact, and that's the reason why.
Isn't it remarkable that, I mean, these are two random comics that so much changed? I mean, this really marks as, I mean, it's not the beginning of comics, but it's a great representation of underground comics. So it's like, this is the beginning of one era.
Right, it's one of the earlier undergrounds, yep.
And then this is a marker at the end of another timeline. And the things that took place in all media between the two produces this, right? And it's like, I mean, I know that the word Force existed before Star Wars, but Fabulous Furry Freak Brothers is well before Star Wars. This is while the huge expanse of Star Wars is still being felt in pop culture, especially among kids. So using Atari Force and having spaceships and otherworldly type settings and stuff like that, well, maybe they're trying to ride on that a little bit. And you would buy this, whether the full-size comic or, like you said, the one inside the video game. You wouldn't go to a head shop for that,
no.
Right? It wouldn't sell it there.
No, absolutely
it might not have even existed anymore. It's not nearly as many, or the industry didn't rely on them anymore. It was something that you would either go to a straight-up comic book store to get the comic, maybe the newsstand or drugstore, and then for the video game, Sears, Woolworth, all the department stores. I don't think Radio Shack did they do video games as much? I don't think so.
Well, they had their own at the TRS-80.
Yeah, that's right. Actually, somewhere in my piles here, I have a Radio Shack flyer from 1995 from Father's Day, and it's like all the Father's Day gifts that you should get ready for. Well, the question I have is, why did they make it? And you hinted at it a little bit already. This was for, and the gentleman I talked to before about Fabulous Freak Brothers, it was self-expression. It was part of the culture. It was part of hippie San Francisco kind of outpouring. Whereas Atari Force, why did they make that?
Sheer commercialism, which is pretty much the antithesis of Freak Brothers as far as that goes. The free love, the free drugs, all that. Completely flip side the opposite. Yet they both come through the comic book medium.
So they're not going to do any crossovers between these titles, right? No Atari
Unlikely.
Force meets the Fabulous Freak Brothers.
Unlikely.
I don't know how that would go. Did you know that Everything is a Primary Source now has a series of short videos which, like the podcast, teach social studies concepts through popular culture? Check out the Everything is a Primary Source Finds playlist on YouTube for quick overviews of the artifacts I uncover at Goodwill outlets, pick up from the side of the road, or resurrect from my youth, because I don't throw much out. These are great class starters for teachers, and because each clip ends with citation, they're great for students too. Furthermore, EPS Finds episodes become the starting point for the open source Everything's a Primary Source project, which encourages you and your students, if you have some, to add to the conversation. Or you can just enjoy them as you would any one of the other billions of clips on YouTube. It's up to you. Go to YouTube and become a subscriber to the Everything's a Primary Source channel today. Now, back to the conversation. In the 80s, it's almost been lampooned. It's absolutely been stated that anything that you were trying to sell the kids, especially toys, had to have some kind of other, usually a cartoon that went along with it. I don't remember an Atari Force cartoon. Maybe they had one. I know Laser Tag did. Photon, remember Laser Tag's competitor? They had actually live action shows that went along with those. You had, of course, He-Man, G.I. Joe, My Little Pony. All the things had it. So I wonder if this is like Atari saying, well, we already have a TV thing in the game itself, so we don't really need to have a cartoon because we don't want the kids watching a cartoon on TV. We want them playing the game on the TV, but we don't care what they do with their reading material, so we're not competing with that, so let's give them something that will remind them of.
Well, let me ask you this. Do you think it could be that back in the 80s and certainly all the way through, video games will rot your brain? Oh, look, they're not rotting your brain because we've given you literature, something to read. See, it's not that bad. You almost wonder if
I'm reading the video game now.
Well, no, you read the comic book.
Yeah.
So at least the parents say, well, at least there's something redeeming out of that game.
Like it's, which is funny because you're right. I think they would give anything, be like, well, I am reading. Maybe the copy of some classic book. This would fit nicely inside of it, so it looks like you're reading it. But giving a kind of like compromising as you go. Be like, okay, at least they're not playing the video game. I'm sure there's something to that. That's probably the selling point for Atari to do it. I remember learning about when He-Man was coming out, because it was a toy first and cartoon after, that they made a short-run comic series to be included with it so they'd be introduced to characters. But they said one of the reasons that they stopped doing this is because they realized that most of their audience for the toys couldn't read. And so, or at least they couldn't read the kinds of dialogue that was in there. It's too beyond them. So if they're in kindergarten, they're not.
Right.
And so it's kind of a wasted, product promotion kind of thing.
Although they did end up doing not exactly golden books, but similar books to that. They were softcover books from the 80s, but they did put those out.
I do remember because they were more, it was a way to, they had regular text, they didn't have the word bubbles, so it read more like a picture book. And I remember having a few of those. I just saw in the store yesterday a copy of a little golden book for Alien with Ripley, and I'm like, I don't know how I feel about that. That's kind of weird. Like, I know that movie's like 50 years old, but it's still a pretty scary movie. I don't know if I'd introduce it. I mean, in 1979 when that movie came out, no way would they
no, absolutely not.
have a companion to, okay, here's your introduction to this thing that just kills people as it pops out of their chests. Like, that's exactly what we want our little kids to be reading. So again, this kind of marks, if you were to use print media as it's the support system for so much of other things that we have with us at any given time. I would think that the Fabulous Furry Freak Brothers is kind of the print version of the music that you're listening to from that same era and same location. Atari, like we just said, Atari Force is the print support system for the video game that you're playing. And then move ahead, we're probably in a time of almost like a tornado of like, do we make this into print and why? Like, are kids even going to be reading this stuff? Should we be just happy that they're reading, even if it is Alien, the little golden book Alien? I mean, it's such a kind of a weird dilemma that we're in.
At this point, comics, they've evolved into, there are the online comics, obviously. They do come out in that format as well. They've expanded greatly. You've got the manga comics now, which obviously we didn't have that growing up. I mean, the closest thing we would have had would have been the TV show Battle of the Planets and Robotech into the early to mid 80s. That was out as well as a comic book. But now that's a whole separate genre that is hugely collected. And I think the biggest change has been the trade paperbacks, which now are available at the regular, in fact, there's huge sections of them at the regular bookstores. And a lot of people, what they do now is they don't buy the comics individually, they wait for the trade. And that's actually an expression, wait for the trade. Why do I want to run and buy 5 or 10 or 12 different comics when I can just wait for it all to be collected? I can read it all at once. And that is just the way that it's evolved throughout the years. And of course, the hardcover version, the softcover version, all that. And that's become collectible in its own right versus the actual comics. And you said one other thing that you were mentioning buying the Atari Force at the newsstand versus the comic store. I don't know if you're aware of this or not. There's a difference in value between the two as well. If they have usually a little Spider-Man head down in the corner or buy DC Comics Now, those would have been the ones that were put through the comic stores. The ones with the UPC were sold over the counter at the drugstores and wherever else.
Okay.
And there's actually more value the later you get in the newsstand ones, because the conditions tends not to be quite as well, because kids were going through the racks and bending them all down to see what was in there, so hard to get a high grade one. Also, a lot fewer of them were sold that way versus through the comic book store. So there's a whole difference now within the collecting genre of newsstand versus as well.
It's a wild idea, because we don't usually think of
the UPC
having such a difference, and the audience. Because if you're at a comic book store, I mean, the reason why it exists is because the person working there knows what they're doing and they're an expert, and it's almost like a record store, but for comics, and they can give you recommendations. And most of the customers are there for the similar reason, that they are all about treating it like it's a nice, what it is, like a valuable thing. Whereas, going through
that kind of makes sense, though, within the whole. What is ephemera? Ephemera is things that were made to be thrown away.
Right.
The newsstand versions are almost ephemera, because it isn't the collector buying them. The collector would be more likely to go to a comic store and buy them, so therefore the more ephemeral version is the one that's worth more, the newsstand version, because those are not generally purchased by collectors. So it kind of ties all into all of ephemera as well.
Yeah, I mean, I know I have like a Spider-Man thing that I got at church. It was all about, it had nothing to do with church, but it was about literature. It was like Spider-Man jumping into different stories, and that probably is more valuable than...
Right, because of the distribution of it. It wasn't sold. Yep.
I mean, I guess we can learn about economics through this, too. I mean, because as you're saying, in the modern economy, somebody's economizing by saying, well, instead of buying them issue by issue by issue, which some of these comics are running close to like $7 an issue for 15 pages of content and all these ads and stuff, why not just spend the $30 on a volume of it and just, delayed gratification kind of thing? And then same thing with these. So in 1970s, 75 cents, that's not a terrible amount of money, but it's also not giving it away, right? There's some kind of there. And then, for these ones, you'd have to pay for a game, for this size one. So it's almost like the one of the benefits of spending, I don't know, Atari game back then would go for like, what, $30? $40, give or take.
A fair amount of money.
So, I mean, it's given, and I'm thinking, by comparison, mid-'80s, decent enough economy. People probably like, oh, whatever, I'll just,
Well, the crazy thing about that is the Freak Brothers would have been one of those comics as well that would have been in constant production, and all they did was change the prices. So in 1985, you probably could, if there were still head shops around, you could have walked in, or a comic shop would have had that at that point, would have been probably $2.50. And that actually is a way that people can differentiate first prints from. And the funny thing is, at some point on some of the comics, you actually will come across them with the 75 cent with the sticker over it that says $1. Because the prices went up. Well, instead of buying the new one, they just threw the sticker on the old ones that were 75 cents, and now it's $1.
Oh, like, hey, I can see under there.
Basically.
Yeah, it always bugs me when when you see something, anything at all, that's like, especially when it says not for individual sale, and like you're at a convenience store and like you're totally individually selling this. What are you doing? But I mean, you can read into all of this. Ephemera teaches us everything from design to all the production behind it, to geography, to I mean, you're saying you're from Western New York. We're here in New England. It's the same story. This came from San Francisco. I don't know where Atari Force came from. Who even knows?
Corporate
offices. some faceless, and it doesn't matter because we can understand that story no matter what. It's not based on locality as much. Maybe Fabulous Furry Freak Brothers a little bit more. I don't know if the story is set in San Francisco or not, but but as time goes on, it doesn't matter anymore, right? We're receiving the same stories, understanding them fairly similarly, no matter where we are. Dave, thanks so much for joining me. And you say you have a YouTube channel.
I do.
How can people best find that?
Oh, they can go on YouTube and search for the $1 Million Peddlers. $1 Million Peddlers, and we talk all about ephemera on there, among other things, ephemera and other collectibles.
That's awesome. I'm so glad that we have a place like this where we can meet and network and learn about other people who are doing such similar things, and kind of make like a unified force for it, an Atari force maybe.
Oh, I like the way you tied it all together.
Yeah, that one I didn't waste. Thank you again. Popular culture, by definition, connects and unites us, and proves that people of different backgrounds, in fact, have a lot in common with one another. I hope you enjoyed this conversation, at least in part, for that reason. If it connects with you and you'd like to add to it, or any of the podcast episodes, just visit everything-history.com and search for the Everything is a Primary Source project, which can be found in the classroom section of the website. We'd love to hear what you have to say. Be sure to rate and share this podcast wherever you are listening to it now, and follow Everything as a Primary Source on social media, including YouTube and especially Instagram. Thank you for listening to the EPS podcast, where everything is a primary source.